Welcome to this video tutorial. My name is Mrs. Cook and I am an A-level sociology teacher and examiner for AQA. Thought I would do a quick video on this past student's answer for the dreaded question about values. A lot of people hate postmodernism and a lot of people struggle with values, so I thought I would do a quick video to show you how easy it is to get into the top band with these simple paragraph structures. Asking you to apply material from the items, we've got to do that at least once, and your own knowledge. Evaluate the view that sociologists should take the side of the underdog and be committed to change in society. So 70% of this essay has to be explaining the positions whereby sociologists argue, yes, take the side of the underdog. The item hints at the disadvantaged groups that potentially we could talk about, and therefore hints at the theories that you might want to talk about. So expect to see people like feminists and Becker in this answer. Let's have a quick look at the introduction. We need to keep it nice and short, and this is what the student does. Starts off by looking at the concept of the underdog. So an introduction, a good introduction, tends to explain any key concepts in the question. So this student begins the very first sentence with "the underdogs are." So the underdogs in society are the powerless victims such as mental patients, women, ethnic minorities, the working class, and more. Similar to the item, Becker argued. So they've taken the item, but they've added to it. They've referred to it, but they've added some AO1, Becker's ideas. It is Becker who is the absolute must for a study for this kind of question, because Becker and Goldner famously had a debate as to whether they should study the underdog or the overdog. So in the introduction, we've got the concept of the underdog and the key person who proposes that argument. And there's a hint of evaluation, whereas Goldner believed they should research the powerful. On the other hand, positivists argue. So what the student's done in the introduction is gone a bit above and beyond. They've defined the concept of underdog, they've looked at who says it, and then they've started to hint at the evaluation that we might see in the rest of the essay. So it's a bit like a film trailer. You don't get the whole picture, but you get a sneaky peek of the key players in this essay. So with this first paragraph, it is a yes. So it's a 70-30 rule that I tend to teach my students. So if they give you a viewpoint, so in this case they have, should we take the side of the underdog, 70% of your essay should be committed to explaining those who would agree. So first paragraph this student has done is a yes paragraph, and they've brought in Becker following from that introduction. So I've kind of colour coordinated this so you can see the point, the explanation, the link, and the evaluation. Okay, so what I would do is pause the video now and have a good read, because what this student does very well is keep it simple, but also explains the how and the why. They've backed up Becker's ideas on why we should study the underdog. They've given examples of topics where we could study the underdog and why it's important. They've backed up again with Goffman's ideas on the career of the mental patient. So not looking at psychiatrists, the powerful, but actually looking at mental patients' ideas and perspectives in order to understand the conditions of mental health. So really a strong paragraph, because not only did they put Becker, they backed it up with Goffman, and a nice link back to the question. If you look at the evaluation, top band students tend to be explicit, and they tend to explain and unpack the evaluation in a little bit more detail than those who are just short of the top band. You'll see that there is, throughout this essay, postmodernist arguments in the evaluation, because in the introduction, the student did say that's what they are going to conclude with. So if you're going to conclude with postmodernism, you have to have that throughout your essay. But it links nicely with this paragraph evaluation. Postmodernists argue that with this in mind, we can't look at one side. We need to explain social behaviour or inequality by looking at both underdog as well as overdog, which is kind of what Goldner was saying, in so much as Becker overly romanticizes the underdog, but actually if you want to take down inequality, you need to understand it from the powerful perspective. So postmodernists are sort of using that argument and saying, actually, why not look at both? to understand the complexity of life. Paragraph 2 is another yes paragraph, as you would expect with the 70-30 rule. And this student has brought in feminists, another group of sociologists that, like Becca would say, study the underdog. And in this case, the underdog are women. And we need to study women and women's perspectives because largely they have been missed out in sociology. So if you want to understand patriarchy, if you want to take down patriarchy and improve women's lives, then you need to get their perspectives. Again, this paragraph has a nice link back to the question and then an explicit evaluation about essentialism, about this idea that actually when feminists speak about women, we shouldn't say women are sufferers of inequality. We need to be much more specific to avoid essentialism. And again, that links nicely with that postmodernist argument that we shouldn't just take one approach. We need to have that relativist approach where we look at multiple women and their perspectives and inequalities that they face. Now, paragraph 3 is that we should be committed to changing society. So it's a yes paragraph, but it's not the underdog, it's the overdog. So really talking about Goldner in a little bit more detail because we have hinted at him earlier on in the essay. So again, a nice explanation because the students brought in an example of the criminal justice system. If you want to understand institutional racism, then look at court judges, the police officers, not the victims of institutional racism. So it supports with application to real life examples, nice link back, and then again, that explicit evaluation. And again, a nice little hint towards postmodernism, which we know we are nearing the end of the essay, so it's going to be in that conclusion in a paragraph's time. And the last paragraph is your no paragraph. No to values, no to being committed to putting your values, whoever's values they are, they should not be in any research. So for this, we've got the positivists approach and this idea that use quantitative methods, do it objectively. The whole point of sociology is that it should be a science and we should be committed to studying social behaviour in a scientific way. So absolutely no values, don't take any sides, be the objective cold scientist. Again, the student brings in Durkheim, which is a really good study because he looked at suicide, something very, very personal and emotive, and you would think that you can't study that without putting your values in, but he proved that he could do it very scientifically. Again, a nice link back to the question and then an explicit bit of evaluation. Again, evaluating this idea that Durkheim actually wasn't as objective as it was once thought because he did lose a friend to suicide. So that may have been where values crept into his research, right at the kind of choosing phase of what to study. And then the conclusion. So in conclusion was Becker and feminists side with the underdog. Many argue that's far too political, and postmodernists take a relative approach. So I told you postmodernism was going to be the conclusion, and we've had it throughout the essay, and there it is in the conclusion. So there you have it, a modern answer in minutes.